So now we are just going to clean the transmission, clean all the dust and everything, and then we are going to grease everything up, and then install the new release bearing and fork. So we're just going to use some brake cleaner to clean everything off. You may not be able to clean absolutely everything, but you need to do the best you can to clean everything off. Over here on the shaft where the release bearing rides on, if you need to, you may need to use very fine sandpaper, like a thousand grit, to sand down the imperfections so that the release bearing can slide smoothly. But in this case, everything seems to be okay. So I don't really need to sand anything down here. So we are going to install the release fork and the release bearing. So we are just going to use some high temperature wheel bearing grease, which is okay to use. I'm using the Lucas, the red stuff here. So we are going to lubricate the contact points, just a tiny amount of grease. You only want to use a sparingly amount of grease. You don't want to use too much. I'm going to put some on the ball here inside the transmission. Make sure the clip is inside here. I'm going to put a tiny amount in here. Make sure it's in all the way in and seated in. Usually it should click inside there. So we're just going to put a tiny amount of grease on the shaft here. We're going to slide this in and make sure that this piece here clips onto the ball. You would need to verify the operation to make sure that it's moving properly. We're going to install the fork boot. Now you want to make sure that the boot is in properly from the inside here. Make sure that the rectangular piece is on the inside here and lined up. And if you need to, you can wipe off the excess grease. Now this clutch kit came with the spline grease. So we are going to put a little bit of the spline grease on here. We're going to put a little bit of spline grease here. You only need to put a tiny amount. You don't need to put too much. Just as much as what comes inside the packet here. So what you want to do is you want to change your gloves and use new gloves before handling the clutch disc, because you don't want to get any grease or oil on it. So what you want to do here is you just want to slide the disc onto here and clean the excess after. Slide the disc on. This will prevent any splatter from getting onto the friction material. So you want to make sure you do this a number of times. And you want to wipe off the excess grease. You want to wipe off the excess grease here. And the same on the other side. And then you want to do the same on the input shaft. You just want to wipe at the very end of the input shaft here to get rid of the excess grease here. So now I'm going to be changing the axle seals while the transmission is still out. So I'm going to do that now before I put it into the vehicle. Trying to use the axle seal tool here. Just to get this out. So, old seal. I'm just going to clean this area off. Clean all of the dirt that may be in here. What I like to do, I like to put a little bit of the petroleum jelly just at the back of the seal here. Petroleum jelly is safe to use. It's a petroleum base, so if it gets inside the transmission, it will just dissolve with the fluid, and it will not do any harm. We want to keep this straight here. To try your best to get this as straight as possible. Just install these until they are flush against the transmission. So the passenger side is done. Now we are going to do the driver's side. So now we're on the driver's side. So we are going to do the same for the driver's side now. You want to make sure this goes in straight. You don't want to top it in on an angle here. So now it's in flush and it's in all the way. So I'm happy with that. I'm using the private brand seal kit here, PBT. These are good for doing axle seals and front crankshaft seals. And I'm not sure if they do cam seals. These are probably too big for cam seals. But although it says camshaft seal kit on the package. What's left now is I still need to get the bushing for the control cable off. I have to order new control cables, unfortunately. And I'm going to take the bracket off here for the transmission mount because this got a little bit in the way when I was removing the transmission. This will just make things easier when I try to put the transmission back in. Just trying to wiggle the bushing out so I can get it to move and come out. Better to do this now than when it's on the vehicle. Yeah. All the rust there. So now we're just going to lubricate the threads in the inside a tiny bit, and on the dowel pin. So now we are going to be replacing the rear main seal here. But before we remove this seal, we are gonna take the new one and just make sure that we have the correct part. Making sure that I have the correct one before I pull this one out. So make sure that you take note on the correct orientation of the seal. There's usually a very tiny outer lip here, so you might not be able to see that on camera, so that when you install a new seal, you install it the same way. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to remove the seal now. I have a special seal remover tool, so you don't damage the crankshaft. And I know that some guys use a screw or something, a screw in here, and to get it out, or you can actually use a proper seal removal tool. I'm just trying to pry behind there so I can remove the seal. I may need to use something else if I'm not able to get this out. I'm just trying to work the seal back and forth, but being careful and not damage anything or scratch anything up. Just trying to open it up and being patient. I'm gonna try using a screwdriver, but very carefully. Now it's has started to come out. You can see I'm just prying extremely carefully. I'm working its way through, so you don't want to. You just want to take it easy and work in steps. The other tool I used didn't seem to work very well, so I don't know if I'm not using it properly, but anyhow, it's out now. I see there's some sealer from the factory. So we are just going to clean the surface here and then give it a quick wipe, and then You're going to install the new seal. I don't want to get brake cleaner inside the engine, so I just want to spray a sparing amount. Now you want to take the new seal, and you probably want to use maybe petroleum jelly or some sort of white lithium grease, but only a tiny amount. It should be safe for the engine, just to help you to get the seal in, so it doesn't damage the seal when you do the installation. So I'm going to put a little bit around here. You can see there's a spring here. I believe they call it a Gartner spring. So you want to be careful when you try to install this. So just put a little bit of petroleum jelly here. Just to make it easier to slide the seal in. And I'm going to put a little bit on the outside of the ring here. So we are just going to install this by hand first. Make sure you don't roll over the seal. So you need to be really careful to not to roll the seal over the inner lip. You should be able to install it by hand without too much problems. You could use something like this to get inside the inner seal as you are trying to bring it in. Just easily install it by hand for the most part, and then later you can give it a few taps with a hammer, but very light taps. So now you just want to lightly to tap onto the seal. Still not in all the way here. Trying to keep it straight as possible. Still have to do a little bit in the corner here. You need to continually to keep on checking this with your fingers to make sure that it's in properly. There's a very, if you look closely, you'll notice that there's an outer lip here. It should be in after the outer lip, so only the outer lip is exposed. And once you got that, you should be all good to go. So you gotta make sure that it's installed until you reach the outer lip here. I don't know if you guys will be able to see that on camera. So make sure it's all even all the way around, and make sure that you didn't roll the seal over from inside here. So now we are going to be installing the flywheel here, and we're just going to wash it up with brake cleaner. We're going to wipe it now, and then we're going to do a re-wipe after we install it onto the vehicle. So now we are going to install the new flywheel here. I'm using new bolts. I'm not reusing the old bolts. So the new bolts from the Toyota dealership, they have the red thread locker here, so you don't need to install or put the thread locker onto the bolts. I'm just hand tightening them at the moment. So we're just going to snug the bolts in now. This is a 14 millimeter 12 point. You want to work in a crisscross fashion, a star pattern. So now I'm going to torque these bolts to 36. What I did here is I have a bolt and a nut, and I can just use a flathead screwdriver to put this here as I'm torquing the bolts. Or you can use like a utility bar. I tried a small one and a large one, but it just won't be able to fit in there. Or you can use the flywheel turner tool. You can just use this instead and do that. So I'm going to be torquing the bolts now to 36 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go through each one now, make sure they're all tightened to 36. So now we are going to mark each bolt, and we are going to turn them 90 degrees. So we're gonna mark each bolt like this, and we're gonna turn it 90 degrees. So we're gonna turn the bolts 90 degrees in the same fashion, star pattern. So we are going to do this again because the screwdriver slipped. So it's this one here. I should probably just mark them one at a time. You don't want to mark them all at once. You want to make sure and know which one was done and which one wasn't. So we're gonna finish with this one. My torque wrench says 55 degrees, so we're just gonna follow the line until it's 90 degrees here. So this one is done. So I'm going to mark it in white so that I know it's done. We're going to proceed on to the next one. So I'm wiping down the flywheel again. I got tired from all the torquing, so I just ended up using an impact to turn it 90 degrees. I know you're not supposed to do that, but the engine, it kept on moving a lot, and the flywheel was slipping, and I don't have the energy at the moment to do that, so I just tighten it up using the impact. Unfortunately, I don't advise you guys to do that, but it's up to you. But it's not the correct way of doing things, but I don't have that much of an option, so I'm just going to do it the way I'm comfortable doing it. So now I'm going to wash down the pressure plate or the clutch cover, clean everything down, clean all of the dust. And so now we are going to change gloves, and we are going to install the clutch disc along with the alignment tool. So we are going to install the alignment tool onto the clutch disc and leave it in there when we install the pressure plate. So we are going to install the clutch. Take note that the one side says transmission side, so it's facing towards you. So we are going to install the pressure plate. Make sure this says transmission side. It says T/TM, so that's facing towards you. Trying to align the pressure plate onto the dowels here. So now I have the clutch disc and the pressure plate in. I have 6 new bolts. Make sure you try to center the clutch disc as best you can. We are going to install the bolts. So we have the clutch alignment tool in place, and where they have all the bolts in, I just need to tighten it down. Uh, this one doesn't have a pilot bearing in this, so you have to try your best to center the clutch as best as you can. And there's quite a bit of guesswork here because this tool is not all that great that comes with the clutch kit. So I'm going to try to center it the best I can and tighten up the pressure plate. And you could also use a vernier caliper to measure the distance between the tool and the fingers all around. Need to tighten these up in stages. And then after you tighten up all the bolts, you'll start to feel resistance in the bolts. That would mean that they're pretty much tight, and then you can torque them after, and you'll see that the flywheel is is turning. Just make sure you torque everything. I already torqued everything off camera, so I'm just showing you guys for demonstration purposes. And once that's done, you can take the alignment tool out. So now I'm just trying to line up the transmission. You can see the input shaft is aligned with the clutch, the pressure plate. So I'm still trying to get the transmission in. So now I got the transmission in. Just need to tighten up the bell housing. I had a hard time trying to get the transmission in, so wasn't able to film everything. So anyways, just going to tighten up all of the bell housing bolts now. I'm going to do the 5 bolts on the other side. So these are the 5 bolts. I already tightened up 3. 1, 2, 3. And this is the flywheel inspection cover. The 4th one will be up here, and then the last one will be on top. You need to tighten up the last one here. I'll put the torque spec for these on the screen if you want to torque them. Otherwise, just tighten them snug and you're good to go. So now we need to tighten up the 2 bolts in the back here, and then there's one at the very bottom for the starter bolt. So all of the bolts are tightened up on the side. One there. There's one over here. So now we're going to install the bolts for the transmission bracket where the mount is going to go. 1 bolt here and the 3 on top. So now I put all of the bolts in here, 4 bolts for the mount. Now I'm just jacking up the transmission to clear the weight so I can put in the through bolt. I had to use a pry bar to pry back so I can get the bracket inside in between the mount. So you'll need to jack up the transmission a little bit to get it through. Through bolt is in, and install the nut. So that mount is in. I believe you can drop the jack for both the engine and transmission. We still have to do the rear mount. Install the starter back, just 2 bolts, one here and just one in the back here just above the fork area. Yeah. And don't forget to install the plastic inspection cover that goes on top of the starter here where there's a gap. Remove the plastic cover in order to clean the cable for the starter cable. So I cleaned the cable. I put some dielectric grease. I'm just going to reinstall it now. So in order to take this off, you just it clips off and clips on. Just close this up. So once you tie in the nut, you can just close the plastic cover and that's it. And what's left now is you need to put the center engine support and the rear mount and the front mount here. And it's just like a few things here on the transmission side. Still have their ground cable and stuff, hydraulic hose and slave cylinder to put onto the fork. And, I think the backup switch connector and the shifter cables, airbox and the battery and stuff like that. And I'll probably have to wait until I get the new shifter cables. So I'll probably have to replace the whole thing as a set. So now we are going to be installing the center engine support for the front and rear transmission mounts, and we have to reinstall the brackets as well. And there's the damper that goes in the back here where this bolt is. So I need to line that up. I just need to carefully to thread in the nuts in these two holes by hand. Make sure, be careful to not drop them, otherwise you are going to lose them inside the subframe. So now I forgot to put the bracket piece on for the front transmission mount, so I had to take it off because I don't want to take the whole thing off again. So make sure you install the brackets first in the front. Now these bolts are 14 millimeters. We're just gonna install two bolts to hold the mount here. We'll install the through bolt afterwards. So I had this mount incorrectly. This is the front of the vehicle here, so it should be on the upper left corner. This piece here should be on the upper left corner when you reinstall it. So now you just want to drop the transmission a tiny bit so we can get the through bolt in. So we are going to leave this until last. We're going to do the rear now. Just I lowered the jack and then the bolt it went through. So what happened was I had to take out the rear mount, and because I forgot the bracket in the back of the transmission. So you probably want to install the bracket on the back of the transmission before you put the transmission back. Otherwise, you're going to have a hell of a hard time trying to put those 3 bolts in. Just a quick tip to get that bracket in. What I did is I started them by hand first, and I jacked up the engine and the transmission at the same time to clear some room. And then I used some extensions, and I just went in the back here where the exhaust is, and I went from behind here to tighten up the bolts. So if you guys are having a hard time, uh, I'm using a cordless ratchet. So just go behind here in the back with some extensions, and you should be able to tighten up the bolts then. So now the engine mount is in. It was a pain in the butt. So I had some parts in which I was supposed to install last, so I had to play around with everything. So now that's in. I just need to line up the uh, through bolt so I can get the bolt through, and then I'm going to bolt up the mount again. Earlier I bolted up the mount, but I had to undo them. A quick tip is to jack up the transmission and the engine in order to get that mount in. That mount is very difficult to install. So once you get all of the bolts in, you would have to drop the transmission and the engine a tiny bit to line up the holes. This is from the driver side area. So usually I just go underneath the hood and I install the through bolt from here. So I got the through bolt in and it's tight. And we're all done for all of the engine and transmission mounts. And we still need to put the drive shaft axles back in. And then still need to do the battery, airbox, and control cables. But we are going to save them for later until we get the new parts. So now we are going to install the axles back in. We're just going to clean this a little bit and add some petroleum jelly onto the splines, so it'll make it easier to install it into the transmission. And petroleum jelly is safe to use as it's petroleum based. This will make installation easier, and it won't get stuck inside the transmission. We're going to put a little bit of the wheel bearing grease onto the splines of the outer part of the axle. So we're going to install the axle now. Take note on where the C-clip is. If you place the position of the C-clip at 6 o'clock and where the gap is, it will make it easier to install into the transmission. So once it's lined up, you just need to push in a few times until it pops into place. Once you see and hear that it goes in, and then it's in. Push down on the lower control arm and swing the steering knuckle over to line up the ball joint. We have a new axle nut, so we're going to thread in the axle by hand. Axle nut. Reinstall the bolts, the two nuts, and the one bolt. Torque the lower ball joint, two nuts and one bolt to 66 foot-pounds. So the torque spec for this axle nut is 159 foot-pounds. We are just going to use a torque stick to temporarily tighten up the axle nut. You can use a drift chisel to put it inside the rotor or disc vents and to torque the axle nut to 159. So now we are going to stake the axle nut by using the same drift chisel and a hammer, and hit it sharply. And clean the brake rotor of grease. We are probably going to be replacing the brakes on this in the upcoming a few weeks or so, because the rotors are warped and causing a pulsation. So the driver's side is the same thing. We are going to install the driver's side now. Install the axle. And sometimes you may need to line up the ball joint at the same time as the axle. Install the new axle nut. We're going to torque to 159. This is for the driver's side. Insert the drift chisel or the punch. You don't need to stake it too much, just enough to prevent the axle from backing off. And this side is the same exact procedure as the passenger side. The two nuts and the one bolt for the lower ball joint, and it's torqued to 66 foot-pounds. So now you want to reinstall the wheels. So after you're done everything, just make sure you fill the transmission up back with gear oil. So everything is all finished now. I bolted on the slave cylinder. I just need to wait for the control cables, the shifter cables, because this car is not going anywhere until I have the cables, and then I would be able to road test and verify for the clutch operation. So I bolted back the slave cylinder, and I would need to bleed it afterwards.